Someone points a camera at you, and something happens. Not a small thing, a real thing. Your body tenses. Your smile goes wrong. You put your hand up or turn away, or suddenly find something incredibly interesting to look at on the floor. The photographer says, just be natural, and you think, I genuinely do not know how to do that right now. Every cell in your body is acutely, uncomfortably aware that you are being looked at, recorded, frozen, and you hate it. You hate it in a way that's hard to explain to people who don't feel it, because to them it's just a photo. To you it feels like something is being taken. Sound familiar? Here's what most people assume about the person who ducks out of every group photo, who untags themselves immediately, who physically moves away when a camera comes out. They assume it's vanity. They assume it's insecurity about the way they look. That if you just lost the weight, or fixed the hair, or had better skin, the camera aversion would disappear. And sometimes, yes, body image is part of the story. But here's what I want to tell you today. The psychology of hating being photographed goes so much deeper than appearance. It touches identity, control, privacy, the way certain brains process social evaluation, and something genuinely philosophical about what it means to be seen. And by the end of this video, I think you're going to understand yourself, or the person in your life who always dodges the camera, in a way you never quite have before. Let's start with the most immediate thing. What actually happens in your brain and body when a camera is pointed at you? Because it's not nothing. For people who hate being photographed, the experience often triggers what psychologists recognize as a mild to moderate stress response. Cortisol rises, the sympathetic nervous system activates, heart rate increases, and all of this happens in response to a small rectangular device held by someone who probably loves you. Why? Because your brain is not processing the camera as a camera. It's processing it as an audience, a judgment, a permanent record of a moment it didn't consent to. There's a concept in social psychology called the spotlight effect, first described by researchers Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky, which refers to the tendency to overestimate how much other people notice and evaluate us. Most people experience this to some degree, but for people who hate being photographed, the spotlight effect goes into overdrive the moment a lens appears. The imagined audience is not just the person holding the phone, it's everyone who will ever see this image, which in the age of social media could theoretically be anyone, anywhere, forever. And that imagined crowd, watching and assessing, is what the nervous system is actually responding to, not the camera, the crowd. Now layer onto that something called objective self-awareness, a state that gets triggered when you become the focus of attention, where you suddenly see yourself from the outside rather than the inside. Most of the time, you live in your own perspective. You experience life from behind your eyes, not in front of them. Being photographed forcibly reverses that. Suddenly, you are both the experiencer and the object being experienced. And for some people, that reversal is deeply uncomfortable. Not because they dislike themselves, but because the shift in perspective is disorienting, artificial, and hard to manage in real time. You're trying to be a person and an image simultaneously, and those two things don't fit together naturally. There's something worth naming here about control, because one of the things that makes being photographed so uncomfortable for certain people is the radical loss of agency involved. You don't choose when the shutter clicks. You don't choose the angle, the light, the expression your face happened to be making in that quarter second. You don't choose what happens to the image afterward, who sees it, where it goes, how long it stays. The photo becomes a version of you that exists in the world entirely outside your control. And for people who have a high need for autonomy, who are particularly sensitive to situations where they feel they don't have a say, that loss of control is not a small thing. It's the whole thing. Think about it this way. Imagine someone reached into your head, pulled out one specific thought, not necessarily a bad one, just a random one, out of context, and then displayed it on a billboard for strangers to see and comment on. That's not exactly what a photo does, but for some people it's not entirely unlike how it feels. A frozen moment, stripped of all the context that made it make sense, presented to an audience as if it represents the whole. And here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological standpoint. Because the discomfort with being photographed is often most intense not in people who hate the way they look, but in people who have a very strong, very clear internal sense of who they are, and who feel acutely that a photograph cannot capture it. Researchers studying self-concept complexity have found that people with rich, multidimensional self-concepts, people who see themselves as deeply layered, contextual, impossible to reduce, often struggle more with representation in general. An image is a reduction. It takes a full human being in motion, in context, in relationship, and collapses them into a two-dimensional still. And for someone who feels their wholeness very keenly, that collapse feels like a lie, a bad translation, a version of them that is technically accurate and fundamentally wrong at the same time. Some cultures have historically understood this instinctively. Certain indigenous communities have long held beliefs that photography captures something essential, that being photographed takes something. While modern psychology wouldn't frame it that way literally, there's an emotional truth underneath the metaphor that resonates for a lot of people who hate cameras. Something is being taken, not a soul, but a moment of privacy, a version of yourself you didn't offer freely, an expression you wore when you thought no one was measuring you. Let's talk about social media, because you can't have this conversation in 2024 without it. The rise of the camera at all times culture has been genuinely difficult for people who hate being photographed, in ways that I don't think get acknowledged enough. Because it used to be that you could go to a birthday party and there would be one camera, wielded by one person, at the most photogenic moments. Now every person in the room has a device capable of capturing you in high definition at any moment, uploading it instantly to an audience of hundreds or thousands, tagging your face automatically using recognition software. The social contract around consent and photography has shifted dramatically and rapidly, and the people who were always uncomfortable with cameras now live in a world that has essentially declared that comfort irrelevant. And yet, and this is important, the discomfort hasn't gone away. It's just been pathologized, called oversensitivity, called vanity from a different direction, called a refusal to be present, to participate, to stop taking yourself so seriously, which is deeply unfair. Because what's actually happening in a lot of cases is a legitimate and psychologically coherent response to a genuine invasion of something that matters. Privacy is not just a legal concept, it's a psychological need. Research on privacy and well-being consistently shows that the ability to control information about yourself, to choose what you reveal, to whom and when, is strongly connected to mental health, autonomy, and the ability to have an authentic sense of self. When that control is repeatedly taken away, even in small ways, even by loving people at celebrations, the cumulative effect is real. It's not dramatic, it's just a quiet erosion of something that matters. Now I want to say something to the people on the other side of the camera, because you're probably here too. If someone in your life consistently avoids photos, ducks away, goes tense when you aim a phone at them, please hear this. It is almost never about you. It is almost never about the photo itself as a physical object. It is about something in their relationship to visibility and control, and the gap between who they are and who a camera can show. Pushing past that discomfort, insisting on the photo, sneaking the shot, saying, "You'll thank me later," is not affection. It's a small but real violation of something they've tried to communicate. The kindest thing you can do is put the camera down. Let the moment be a moment instead of a document. And for the people who hate being photographed, let me offer you something. You are not broken. You are not vain, not antisocial, not difficult, not taking yourself too seriously. You are a person with a sophisticated and sensitive relationship to your own representation. You understand on some level that you are more than any image can hold. That's not a flaw. That's actually a kind of self-knowledge that a lot of people spend years trying to develop. The goal is not to force yourself to love the camera. The goal is to understand why you don't, and to give yourself permission to have that boundary without shame or apology. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to step out of the frame. You are allowed to let some moments exist only in memory, without evidence, without record, held only in the people who were actually there. Because here's the thing about photographs. They capture light, they capture surfaces, but they cannot capture the feeling in the room, the specific quality of a laugh, the warmth that existed between people in a moment. And the person who refuses to be photographed is often the one who is most alive to exactly those things, the things that don't fit inside a frame. If this felt like it was describing you, I'd really love to hear from you in the comments. Do you hate being photographed? What does it feel like? And has anyone ever really understood it? Let's actually talk about this because I don't think it gets enough honest conversation. And if this channel is where you come to feel understood, subscribe. Because every week we go into exactly these kinds of places. The uncomfortable ones. The ones that don't get named. See you in the next one.